May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Before I go on, I want to tell you something. That yesterday, December 9th, 2023, marked the 10-year anniversary of Katrinka and me arriving in Bali. And, she told me something that I'd totally forgotten, is that we arrived here with nothing but carry-on. And we weren't just coming here for 2 weeks. We were coming to Asia for like half a year. That's what our ticket was. We ended up 3 months. We had to fly out and go to Singapore and fly back in and get new tourist visas because of the 2-month, or 60-day limit. And then at the end of the 3rd month, we flew off to 3 weeks in Thailand, 10 weeks, wonderful weeks in Japan, 8 of which was in an Airbnb in Kyoto. Oh, wonderful, loved it, miss it. Then another 3 weeks in Thailand. I'm sure that was because, man, they really make it difficult to stay there, even for people who live there. I mean, even for foreigners who live there. I mean, foreigners who've lived there a long time, foreigners who are married to Thais and have lived there a long time. They have to go out just like they were tourists, all the time. It's amazing. Anyway, but then we visited some friends in Kuala Lumpur. We were engaged Buddhists. That was really wonderful, and we've seen them a number of times, and not in recent years. And then we came back here, and that was it. So we were gone like, a few months, right? And we came back here, and we said, well, let's just stay here. And we let our return tickets expire. And Katrinka's gone back almost every year. Not if her son was coming here. And they are coming here in March, his son and his wife and their 2 daughters. Anyway, she said we arrived with carry-on. Wow. Only. And so, man, you wouldn't believe what we got now. We'd need a container to take this back, but we're not going to do that. But anyway, that's it. All right. Now, back to the podcast proper. So today we have a guest, Daigaku Rumme, and I am going to read to you from his biography on the Soto Zen Buddhist Association site, szba.org. So it's a Daigaku Rumme, Confluence Zen Center, St. Louis, Maplewood, Missouri. Daigaku Rumme was born in Mason City, Iowa in 1950. He was ordained as Soto priest by Seikkei Harada Roshi in 1978. For more than 27 years, he practiced under Harada Roshi at Hosshinji Monastery in Fukui, Japan. In March 2003, he moved to San Francisco to work on the staff of the Soto Zen International Center. For the 7 years he worked there, he resided at the San Francisco Zen Center. In April 2010, Rumme moved to Los Angeles, where he worked as the director of the Soto Zen Buddhist North American office and as the head priest of Zenshuji Soto Temple. In April 2015, he resigned from his position in Los Angeles and moved to St. Louis. He is translator of, and now I'm going to quick reading from that and read to you the books he has translated. The important one is the new one, and the first thing we do in this podcast is he talks about it. Well, they're all important, but for now, this is the most important because it's just recently out. And the name of it is The Formless Record of the Transmission of Illumination, a contemporary commentary on Keizan Zenji's Denkoroku, Volume 1, by Gien Inoue. We're going to talk about that book. And then earlier books that he translated, working with Gien Inoue and working with Seikkei Harada. The Essence of Zen, the Teaching of Seikkei Harada, translated and edited by Daigaku Rumme. A Blueprint of Enlightenment, a contemporary commentary on Dogen Zenji's Gakudo Yojinshu, Guidelines for Studying the Way, by Gien Inoue, Daigaku Rumme. Right, that's what it says in Amazon, right? Unfathomable Depths, Drawing Wisdom for Today from a Classical Zen Poem by Seikkei Harada, translated by Daigaku Rumme. Okay, so there we have that. And now I want to go back to his Zen group, the Confluence Zen Center. I think of it as St. Louis, but it's officially, according to the Soto Zen Buddhist site, it's officially Maplewood, Missouri. So anyway, that's pretty good. You've got a pretty good idea. And, anything else I'd have to say about him will be in the podcast. So that's enough, huh? Let's go to our pause to meditate. So, when you hear the bell, if you wish to meditate or whatever, hit pause. And meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever and give Daigaku Rumme a call.
Hello.
Hi, Daigaku. How are you?
How's life in paradise?
It's I don't know. I live in Bali. Yeah.
Okay.
How is it there in St. Louis?
Good. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I had a good time
it's cold,
there.
We're kind of going in towards winter now, but But it's been nice. And actually, I was born in Iowa, so it doesn't feel too far away from home.
Oh, really? Really? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, you say you were unfamiliar with podcasts. This was being recorded from the time you said hello, and it is not live. And I want to focus on the book first, and then I want to hear about you. And that's all. And there's no limit to the time. It doesn't matter. And I'm happy to talk with you. But first, let's talk about the Formless Record of the Transmission of Illumination, a contemporary commentary on Keizan Zenji's Denkoroku by Gien Inoue. But I take it that you were involved in the translation, too.
I was. Me and my translation partner, Miss Keiko Rumme. So together we've been working on this for about 3 years, I think. It's a difficult text. And, well, she's got other things going on, so it's not like a job you can just go through quickly. And we're just very happy to get volume 1 out. If all goes well, there will be eventually 4 volumes.
Wow. Well, tell us about the book, and tell us about Keizan. I'm very happy to see something coming out about Keizan.
Well, Keizan Zenji is regarded as one of the 2 founders of the Soto sect in Japan, right? Along with Dogen Zenji. But he's long been in the shadow, I would say, of Dogen Zenji, who was not only was he an enlightened man, but he was a literary genius. And his works, primarily the Shobo Genzo, but other things as well, the extensive record and other works, have really been the primary focus of teaching material in the Soto sect, both in Japan and in the West. And Keizan is just not very well known, I think, largely for that reason. As well as he doesn't have a great amount of work to his name. So the Denkoroku is his best known work, and it's been translated several times into English. I have 3 or 4 translations. But there are very, very few commentaries on this work. And frankly, I think it's a difficult text, so it's good to have a contemporary commentary.
Well, Keizan, he's thought of as the popularizer of Soto Zen. Isn't that right?
Yeah, he and his disciples are known for having spread the Soto teaching around Japan. I was reading recently in an article that Dogen Zenji, when he was alive, he was not well known. He had gone into the mountains of Fukui to start his temple Eiheiji, which is now a major training monastery of the Soto sect. But at that time, he was not well known among contemporary, let's say, historians and so on. And it was really Keizan Zenji and his disciples who took Dogen Zenji's teaching and went around different parts of Japan and spread the teaching such that, and I don't know the exact figures, but of course Keizan Zenji is known for having founded Shoji, which is today even still the other main training monastery of the Soto sect in Japan.
Right.
But many of the smaller temples throughout Japan are aligned with Sojiji.
Yeah.
So for that reason, if for that reason only, he's a significant person in the Soto sect.
He's also associated with promoting women.
Is he? That I'm not overly familiar with that. I think I have heard that.
Yeah. Well,
maybe he had Dharma successors who were women.
Yeah. He had, he had contact. He had women students and I guess women Dharmaneers. I don't know the details of it. I'll look into it further. But that is one thing I've read about him. So
what I know about him mainly is through this book I've been translating. There's a real fine introduction. The Soto Shu sponsored a new translation of the Denkoroku, which came out in 2017. And there's a long introduction, I think, by William Bodiford, both about Keizan Zenji and the Denkoroku as well.
Well, can you give us a look inside at what sort of Dharma is in the book?
Let me just describe briefly for those of people who are not familiar with the Denkoroku.
Yeah.
This book is a series of lectures that he gave. So they were not written down, apparently. They were what we know now as the Denkoroku. Of course, over history, that text has changed somewhat. Many hands have been on it.
Yeah.
But originally there were notes taken by one or possibly two of his attendants. We don't know exactly who they were, but these notes, and we don't know if Keizan was involved in editing them afterwards, but they are a group of 53 lectures, as we know them now, where he talks about each of the ancestors, going back to Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, the founder of Buddhism, through 28 ancestors in India, 23 ancestors in China, and 2 in Japan, who would have been Dogen Zenji and Kon Eijo Zenji. So he's tracing the lineage of the Soto sect all the way back to the Buddha. And as we know the Denkoroku now, it's divided, each chapter is divided into 4 different divisions. But these divisions were added later. But in any case, it begins with what is called a root case, which is more or less a koan, I would say, where describing how the next ancestor met his teacher. And usually the question that comes as the main part of that case. Then he describes what they call pivotal circumstances, the details of his life, of the new ancestor's life, and so on. And then a part called the investigation, which is Keizan Zenji's commentary on that text. And then each case ends with a verse. I have to say for myself that I was never really drawn to the Denkoroku. A lot of it just seems it seems a little bit medieval for my taste. But Gien Inoue Roshi's commentary really brings it to life, I think, for us in these modern times. You studied with Harada Seikkei Roshi. That's correct.
And
I was ordained by him, right?
Pardon?
I was ordained.
Yeah.
By Harada Seikkei Roshi.
And
I lived for many years at his monastery, Hosshinji Monastery.
Yeah. When did you go to Japan, and what took you there? Yep.
Well, I first went to Japan when I was 10, going on 11 years old.
Oh.
And that was in 1961. My father was a missionary, a Christian missionary in Japan.
Hmm.
And so that was just before I was going into sixth grade. So it was all the way through middle school and high school, except for 1 year, I lived in Japan. And then I returned to the States for college and worked for a couple of years after college. And then I went back to Japan in 1974. So I was there for, almost 30 years, I think. Something like that. Yeah, nearly 30 years. A large part of that time was at Hosshinji Monastery.
All right. Say that again. You were in Japan for almost 30 years. And then what?
I was there, and a large part of that was, of that time, was spent at Hosshinji.
Yeah,
under Harada Roshi.
Right. How did that come about? Why'd you get interested in Zen? Why'd you go there?
Well, that went all the way back to my high school days. When I was in Japan, there was a time when, so that was the 1960s. Many of my schoolmates were not overly. I went to an American school, by the way, and many of my schoolmates were not overly interested in being in Japan. They were more interested in American things, but I found I was quite attracted to Japanese culture in my way.
Yeah.
And when I was a senior in high school, we took a trip. A class of mine took a trip to Kyoto, and we visited various well-known temples and shrines and so on in Kyoto and Nara. And it was a visit we made to Daigaku Rumme Monastery, where I first met a Japanese priest, a Zen priest. I was quite taken with him. His earnestness and something about just the way he carried himself, that was one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I happened to meet an American, Brian Victoria.
Ah, yeah, I know Brian.
In high school.
Wow.
So we crossed paths when I was a senior in high school. So there, that was the seed, a curiosity about Zen. In college, I majored in history, but I wrote my last paper, senior paper, on Zen. So it was a slowly developing idea, and this was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that really gave me the inspiration to go back to Japan and look for a place to find a teacher to practice Zazen.
I just want to go back to Brian Victoria for a second. You met him. Where was he when you met him?
That was during the Vietnam War, and at a young age, I was sure I didn't want to go to Vietnam to be part of that war. So I was looking into being a conscientious objector.
Yeah.
And close to the high school where I went to school, there was a Quaker meeting group. And so I got permission one Sunday to go up there and meet the man who organized that. And by chance, Brian guessed as well. So I met.
Oh, so that was, you met Brian in America.
No, that was in Tokyo. I was in school. I went to high school in Tokyo.
Oh, so you were looking, in Tokyo, you were looking into being a conscientious objector.
That's correct. Well, I was still young at that time, but I was thinking about that. And
how old were you then?
How does one become a conscientious objector? I was at that stage.
Uh-huh. How old were you then?
I would say 17 or 18.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, Brian was certainly an anti-war activist and fascinating character. So then you went back to Japan in what year?
1974.
74. Boy, that's quite early. And where did you go?
I lived for 2 years in Kyoto.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where to go. I'd been to Kyoto when I was in high school. So I thought of Kyoto as the center of Zen. I had that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really know where to go. Then I found a place to stay. I went to Kyoto. I found a place to stay where there were other Westerners staying. And I heard about Antaiji.
Uh-huh.
So Antaiji was still in Kyoto. Was the first place I'd ever went to sit.
Oh.
And a friend of mine would go up there and sit part of sessions. I guess I did that for a year and a half or so before I went up to Hosshinji. I had an old friend. Actually, she was a Catholic nun who had met two Americans who were living at Hosshinji at the immigration office. And that was how I heard about Hosshinji. And it happened that there were already, I think, 4 or 5 Westerners there training at Hosshinji. So it was that was helpful to get my foot in the door there. So I went up to live there in November 1976.
But now, up to that point, how had you supported yourself?
I was teaching English in Kyoto.
Yeah.
Yeah, like many others. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you teaching for a school?
I did both. Some private lessons. I happened to get some private lessons, and then also with a school as well.
Yeah.
A couple different schools.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so how was your first visit to Hosshinji?
My first visit was to see my friend, the friend who had gone with me to Antaiji. He had gone up there before I did. So I went up to visit him. And, I had a chance to meet Harada Roshi. And it's a curious thing because I had read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, many, many times. And I think looking back, it seemed like I knew what Zen was. I had an idea what Zen was. So when I met Harada Roshi, I didn't have any questions. I just knew that I wanted to go into a monastic situation to practice Zen.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, Harada Roshi says, he doesn't have any questions, so why don't you guys go away? So then I went up and talked to some of the Westerners who were there. And it came out in that conversation, what do you actually do when you're sitting in Zazen? And I had always thought that to sit in Zazen, you looked at the breath, you followed the breath. So one of the guys said, you should go back and ask Roshi about that. And I said, me, by myself? Because by that time my friend was no longer there, and I did speak some Japanese, but I wouldn't say I was overly fluent. He said, yeah, you just go back. He told me, one of the guys told me, yeah, you just go and you sit outside his door and say, "Gomen kudasai," and he'll say, he'll answer, and you explain that you have a question. And I thought, oh boy, okay. Well, so I did that. And now his wife, he was married, and his wife, he was with his wife there, so there were the three of us now. So in the Japanese, I explained, I've always thought that Zazen is to follow the breath. And he looked at me and he said, Zazen is much bigger than that. And he may have said something like, Zazen is every part of your life. Don't restrict it to one thing. Don't just think it's one thing. So that became a question to me. That's all I remember of that conversation. Mm-hmm. But that really started my questioning about what is Zazen, what are you doing in Zazen, and what is it in practice. And I didn't go up there to live until about 6 months after that short conversation with him. But that was my first contact with him.
So you went back 6 months later, and
I did.
And what happened then?
Well, I asked if I could. I mean, I had permission. I had gone up one other time for part of the October session, and I asked him if it would be okay to come up. He said yes. I thought maybe I was going to stay for a year or two. I was a young man. I was 24, 25. That was 1975. I was 25 years old. I knew that there were other Westerners there, but I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into. And he said, well, you should stay for 6 months. I said, okay. And that turned out to be very difficult. I went up in November. It was very cold. And
yeah,
there was no heat. It was just a couple of weeks before Rohat Sesshin, and it was just very difficult.
And then how was Rohatsu?
I think I'm pretty sure I had a bad cold on top of it. But I just remember just very cold. The way they did it in Hosshinji was they brought out the hibachi. That's how they used. They used hibachi to heat the rooms, which were good for about heating your hands. And they pulled those hibachi out after Rohatsu was finished. There was snow on the ground that first Rohatsu. I was there. And I just remember how cold it was. Yeah. Yep.
So did you stay the whole 6 months?
I did.
And then?
I did. I stayed on, I made it through that first 6 months. And I was put in the kitchen. I worked in the kitchen. I stayed on. I just managed to stay on. I asked Roshi if I could become a monk at a certain point. He said, no, your father's a missionary. That's not going to work. And I was disappointed about that, but what could I do? So I stayed on as a lay person. And about 6 months after that first rejection, I asked him again. I said, no, I think I really hope I could become a monk. And he agreed. So I was ordained. The date was March 17th, although in my record it's April the 8th, 1978. I was given the name Daigaku.
Mm-hmm.
And not too long after that, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis.
Oh, goodness. And what year was that?
Yep. 1978. So it was about 3 months after I was ordained.
Ah.
And so that was, of course, was very difficult. I had to leave the temple. I stayed with my teacher's wife was the head priest of a much smaller temple, a mountain temple, not too terribly far away by car, 20 minutes by car maybe. And so I stayed at her temple for a month. But then it became obvious that this wasn't something that was going to go away easily. So I went to the hospital, the Obama Hospital, the public hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there.
Listen, we should explain that this is in the town of Obama.
Obama, correct.
Right. Yeah.
Famous for supporting Barack Obama in 2000?
Right.
8? Was that his first run? Pronunciation.
Oh
Obama.
Gosh. Let's see. Obama was elected in, I think you're right, 2008. 16 was Trump, right.
Right.
Yeah.
That town got a 15 minutes of fame for, they made little manju, it was their chance to publicize their small little town. So
Yeah. There's not much there.
With Obama's face on it. So.
Yeah.
That's a small little town on the Japan Sea. Sometimes called Little Nara because there are so many temples in that area.
Oh. Yeah. So now
very close to Kyoto
Yeah. The tuberculosis, is that contagious?
It is. And that's why I had to leave her temple. It's people with TB cough, and that phlegm, that bacteria that can be contagious. Yeah, I mean, in that part of Japan, it's a very humid part of Japan. At one time there was a lot of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
In that area. And it's that bacteria, from what I understand, is in the air. If you're healthy, you can breathe that bacteria in, and you have enough resistance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. You don't become infected by it, but I did.
Uh-huh.
I think one of the reasons this is speculation on my part, but I had studied shakuhachi, the bamboo flute, while I was in Kyoto. And I think my teacher had tuberculosis. And, he would play my flute, I would play his flutes. So I thought that may have been the place where I came in contact with it in a more direct way than many people do.
Well, what was it like, and how long did it last?
That's a disease where you become weak. You feel weak. So they prescribe lots of sleep and as healthy, nutritious food as you can eat. So it's Daigaku, as they say in Japanese, it's a luxurious, literally a luxurious disease because you get to sleep a lot, supposedly, and eat good food. Well, in the hospital, it wasn't that great, but good enough. Mm-hmm. That together with streptomycin did it.
Hmm. And how long were you sick with tuberculosis?
I was in the hospital almost exactly a year.
Oh my gosh, that must have been hard. Oh.
It was, you know, I've been reading a book called The Black Angels, and my wife is a nurse, and she heard about this book called The Black Angels, a group of black nurses who came up from the South in the United States, part of the Great Migration, and worked at a TB hospital in New York City on Staten Island called the Fairview. So I was kind of thinking about it when I had it. I was talking to my wife about that. And, you know, that's so many people throughout history have died from TB.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only in the last, since 1950s, I came up with a drug regimen that was able to control TB.
Yeah. Yeah, and
so that was only like 25 years before I got it.
Well, what's the, you know, I've never quite understood. TB was such a big thing like 100 years ago. What are the significant factors in us being able to control it?
Well, it's drugs. Yeah.
And which drugs?
Streptomycin was a big one. You know, drugs that you take in pills, pharmaceuticals. That it was quite. I read. So just as I mentioned, I just read this book where they describe how they tried 8 kinds of things. They tried all kinds of stuff that a lot of it didn't work at all. Mm-hmm. And then gradually they were able to. They found a compound of 3 drugs, and I forget the names, but streptomycin was one of the big 3.
Yeah.
And that was with those drugs, it was possible to kill the bacteria.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
So
in Japan, they're just very, very now. I think now here in the United States, there are people with TB.
Yeah.
But they're usually treated as outpatients.
Oh, is that right?
As outpatients. So
yeah.
They come to the hospital, they get their medicines, and they're monitored by doctors and all that. But in Japan, they're just very conservative about how a disease like that is controlled. And so I ended up spending a whole year in the hospital. But you know what? I used that time when I realized I wasn't going to get out soon. I started using that time to study my teacher's talks. We just started recording my teacher's talks. A lot of those we didn't really understand that well, at least I didn't. And I also started teaching myself how to read and write Japanese characters.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had that time, I wouldn't be doing this kind of translation work that I'm doing now. I just wouldn't have had the time.
So, it was sort of a gift.
You could say that.
Yeah.
You could say that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So after that year,
After that year, I was not strong enough to go right back to the monastery.
Oh, yeah, I want to ask you one thing. During that year, how much did you walk? What sort of physical shape were you in after the year?
After a certain while, I was actually in the hospital for short times. So like a day, the monastery was about a 15-minute walk away from the hospital. Mm-hmm. So I was allowed to go back there. And I think I was there for 6 months before I was allowed to leave. So I was able to walk. I could walk, but I wasn't that strong. And of course, I was used to, at that time, I was used to a warm room and certainly a more nutritious diet than what I was eating at the monastery. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, I went to live at another smaller temple where one of the monks from Hosshinji was a caretaker priest. So I lived there for 9 months.
What was that like?
That was even more difficult than being in the hospital. Now, when I was in the hospital, I was completely engrossed in the language, to learn the language. I kind of set my sight on using that time to learn the language. So when I got out, then all kinds of doubts started coming to me about, wow, am I really going to be able to make it back to the monastery? And I lived at this smaller temple with this other Japanese monk, and together we had a sort of practice. We cleaned the place, and we chanted sutras together, and did Zazen together, and so on. And then now and again, I would go for a day or two of sesshin at the monastery. So it was a matter of readjusting myself to life in the outside world. But as I think back now, that was difficult because there was this question: would I really be able to go back to the monastery? It's like a doubt, a nagging doubt that I created, but it was real. Mm-hmm. I had to deal with it. Well, long story short, the following spring, I got out of the hospital at the end of July, I think. Or maybe it was June. I forget. Either June or July. So I went to live at that. It must have been June. I think it was the end of June. So I got out at the end of June. I went to live at that small temple. What was that? Gien was the name of the place. And then the following spring, so for the spring Hangro, let's say at the end of March, maybe the beginning of April, I went back to live in the monastery.
In Hosshinji.
Yep. At Hosshinji.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah. And so
I never left.
Yeah.
Well, I did make a trip. I did, but I mainly stayed there for another 25 years.
My. And,
yeah, long time.
Wow. And all right, so what were the transitional points there? Did you have any other ordinations or?
For myself, no. Just the usual. Everybody does shuso, and
so you were Shuso. They had Shuso.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's part of the monastic life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started traveling. I also traveled with Harada Roshi. I went to Germany once to translate for him, and
into English?
To India. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody translated from English into German.
You mean you had double translation at the same time?
Double translation. Yep. Not perfect, but after that he found a Japanese woman who spoke German, so that was better. Yeah, it was a long time. I spent a long time there. Doing translation was one of the things that kept me going. That was just something I enjoyed doing. I still do enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you get transmission?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, that's like another ordination or another step, a rather important one.
Yeah, it is, David, but all the people who got transmission from Harada Roshi, there were 10 or 15. We always knew that was, it was something. It was a piece of paper, but it was not his recognition that we had completed our training.
Mm-hmm.
He always made that clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Actually, Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki did too, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, perhaps so.
Yeah, I talked to him about that. He said it shows a full commitment and a good understanding, but he was rather non-committal.
It's kind of like getting a gold watch after 25 years. You've been at the job 25 years. Okay, what's your ways? Okay, so I never wore it there.
Yeah. And wait a minute. You never what? You never what?
I never wore a colored Keizan at Hosshinji at that time.
Uh-huh. Well, did Harada Roshi went to Seikkei Roshi went to Italy some, didn't he?
Right. Originally, I was going to go with him. He told me, you're going to go with me. And I said, really? Italy? Yeah, you get it's an order. And that was 2002, maybe, something like that. 2001, maybe. I forget the details there. But not that long before he went, I received the news, I'm not going. They found somebody else. They found an Italian who speaks Japanese.
Yeah.
He speaks French, he speaks Italian, he speaks English, he speaks Japanese. Okay. So once again, the rug had been pulled out from underneath me, and I thought about it. I talked to Roshi about it. I decided to stay at Hosshinji. About 6 months later, Soto Shu came back and asked me, well, how about going to America? How about going to San Francisco? And I thought about it. And I don't think Harada Roshi was overly thrilled with that idea, but he said, okay, well, give it a try. And so I went to San Francisco. And they have a small office. You may know that office. It's now at Sokoji, in the basement of Sokoji.
Yeah.
Called the International Center.
Yeah.
And I worked there on that staff for 7 years. At the time, I lived in San Francisco.
Yeah. That was, so you went to San Francisco while Harada Roshi was still alive?
That's correct. That's correct. He was in Italy at that time.
And how long was he in Italy?
2 years.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I knew he was there. I didn't know it was that long.
I think he originally thought he would stay longer. But, and I never really heard that from him. But I think he just realized this, not speaking the language and dealing with, I don't know, the way Soto Shu was in Italy, if I could say that, he just realized this is not for me.
Yeah.
And so he resigned.
So he was a part of the Soto Shu, because his lineage, his transmission comes from Harada, the other Harada. Is that right? I can't remember his name.
No, Harada Sogaku. No. Is that who you're thinking? Sogaku?
Yeah. Yasutani's teacher.
That's Sogaku.
Yeah.
Right. He was ordained by one of Sogaku's disciples, Harada Setsu.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he practiced at Hosshinji, I think, in 1951. That's the date. I think he was there in 1951. And, but he became disenchanted with Sogaku Roshi quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe after a year or so. And that's when he went to practice under Inoue, Gien Roshi, the one who's commenting on the Denkoroku.
So, Inoue, is he alive?
No, he died in 1981.
Oh, so he's the one who did the commentary, and the translation is by you and that woman?
Keiko Omai.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand. Oh.
Yeah, we're just translators. We're translating Inoue Roshi's commentary.
Yeah.
On the Denkoroku. That's certainly not my commentary. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But that's my connection with Inoue. My connection with Inoue Roshi is through my teacher.
So, around Seikkei Roshi's lineage goes back to, remind me?
Well, it does come through Harada Sesri, his ordination teacher. And then his Inka Shome, his certification of realization, enlightenment, comes from Inoue Roshi.
Oh, okay. And Inoue's comes from?
Well, he was recognized by many teachers, but Ida Torin Roshi seems to be the last person that he got. He was recognized by.
And refresh my memory on the connection to the Harada Sogaku Yasutani line.
Well, they were the teachers at Hosshinji when my teacher was ordained.
Oh.
At that time, Sogaku Roshi was the master. Sogaku Roshi was the master.
Oh, at Hosshinji.
He was at Hosshinji.
Oh.
And his disciple, Harada Sesri, was the Jushoku, the resident priest.
Oh,
So they had split that between the administrative part and the teacher, the master.
Oh, so the teacher wasn't the Jushoku.
That's correct.
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with that structure. Is that very common?
There's a word. Are you familiar with the word shike? Shike.
Yeah.
It's a Soto. Well, it's a Zen word for master.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those positions are divided.
Uh-huh.
In the case of my teacher did both. He was both the Jushoku and the Shike.
Uh-huh. So you could, if in the way it was with before, it was the Jushoku and the Shike.
They were divided, correct. Sogaku Roshi was the Shike.
Oh, okay.
Seikkei Roshi.
Oh, all right.
The Jushoku.
All right. Now, I visited there, and I met with Harada Seikkei Roshi one time, and I was very impressed with him. I did not have a question because
okay.
I don't know. I was just visiting and checking the place out, and I didn't feel like it would have been, sincere or anything. I would just have had to come up with something. But then I went over to Bukoki. Huh? Go on.
Oh,
huh?
What year was that? What year? What year did you?
Oh, this is 1988.
88. Wow. Okay.
And
I would have been there. Yeah.
Yeah. It might have been you who translated.
Possibly, but I think I would have remembered that.
Yeah. I spoke some Japanese. I mean, I just arrived. I spoke a little Japanese, but I spoke Japanese with the other Harada Tangen. But his was very simple. It was easier. But my Japanese was never good like yours, good Lord. Anyway, I just walked from there over to Bukokuji, right?
Right.
And met Harada Tangen Roshi. And that was totally different. And the striking thing to me was, now Harada Tangen was a Dharma heir of Harada Sogaku, am I correct?
Correct. My understanding is he was the very last person to receive Shiho from Sogaku Roshi.
Yeah, but there was some problem between those two Haradas and the temples. They both did Takahatsu in the area, if I recall correctly, but they didn't have any relationship. Is that right?
That's not exactly correct. I don't know the details about that, but Seikkei Roshi obviously was chosen to be the next Jushoku at Hosshinji. And it's true, there were Westerners over at Bukokuji as well, and but we were encouraged not to talk to them, to fraternize with them. Is that the right word?
Right. That sounds right. Sure.
And people heard about that. People would come in and say, "Well, what? That's not right. You guys are living that close. You're living 100 yards apart. Not to have any connection. That's weird." But that was really a kindness on the part of maybe both teachers. I don't know what Tangen Roshi thought, but the idea was, you start talking to these other people from another temple, and Tangen Roshi is teaching this and doing this and that, and it's just a way to confuse yourself.
Yeah.
By mixing together different points of view.
Yeah.
So don't do that. Don't do that. You're saving yourself trouble.
Yeah. I talked to Shunryu Suzuki about that sort of thing. I was asking him if somebody could talk at Tassajara, and he went, "Oh, wow, this is America. Okay, we'd never do that in Japan." He said, we don't mix like that. He said the teacher is jealous of other teachers. They want to keep their temple for their teaching and sort of, not confuse things, not mix it up. He said, but this is America. He'd sort of given up, and he said, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I faced that too, and that's, all of this information now that's online, books, podcasts, et cetera. Not to mention other, Tibetan and this, that, and the other thing. I think that's really dangerous, or if that's the right word, or just confusing. If you don't really know what it's all about, you're just going to confuse yourself.
Richard Baker called that eating around the edge of the pie.
Yeah. Well, you see a lot of it now. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Even now more with the internet,
Yeah. It reminds me, I ran into, this is a long time ago, or, this is 15, 20 years ago, a couple of people, one guy is priest, has a little sitting group in Sebastopol, and we were in Whole Foods, and he met somebody else who had some sitting room, and they were talking, and it was just name dropping all the different workshops and teachers and things they looked into and were doing and meeting. And I just thought, wow, that's, I just didn't have any interest in that. But that is obviously something a lot of people are doing.
I think it's almost unavoidable. It's like going into a candy store. You want to try this and that and the other thing, but how is a person to know? You're trying this one and this one and this one and this one. How are you going to know which one is right?
Yeah, which one is right for you? I mean, you've got to choose. There's that thing in Japanese, go in, right?
Yeah.
Where it's sort of like, it's not really putting down other paths or other teachers, but it's saying this is the one I vibrate with, or this is what I have a good connection with, right?
Right. Well, I feel very, very fortunate that I did not taste around go around eating around the edge of the pie.
Yeah.
I was at Antaiji. I knew that wasn't the place for me. And then I found my teacher, Harada Roshi. I mean, it took a while to really, for that to sink in, but I didn't go around tasting elsewhere after that.
Yeah. Antaiji is sort of a Zazen-only temple, right? I mean, how would you characterize their practice?
Well, he used to scold me and say there shouldn't be any Zazen. It's not you. You're not doing Zazen. You're not doing Zazen. He would scold me. It's not, you're not doing Zazen. I mean, one of his main teachings, if you read his books, is that Zazen is Zazen. And, well, that's a koan in its own right, but it's not you doing Zazen.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, that's one part of it. The other part is that your whole life is Zazen. It's not limited to sitting on a cushion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Both excellent points. I want to ask you about how did your father and mother deal with all this?
Well, for my mother, it was never a problem. But for my father, that was a challenge, certainly. And probably a source of suffering for him. Although, as time went on, I think he got used to it. I used to say he's been gone quite some years now, but I think he got used to it, and he was even proud of me in some ways. I think, and that was after he retired as a missionary. He lived his life out in Japan. He had found his home in Japan, and I think he understood. That was the way I had found, and it was certainly different than his. But the Japanese often said, "Oh, well, you guys are doing the same thing." Mm-hmm. But from an American point of view, that's not quite the same way.
So your father stayed in Japan?
He did. He died in Japan. Yeah.
Where?
He lived, at that time, he was living in Nagoya.
Oh. Huh. Goodness.
That's where he retired, and he went into the wedding business.
Ah, ha, ha, ha. Into the Christian wedding business. Or was it not just Christian?
No, it was all Christian. I mean, he had all the gear, and he knew how to do it. So, and he taught English too.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting.
By that time, my parents had divorced. My mother had returned to the United States, so he just he lived his life out in Japan.
Oh, had he stayed in Japan when you went back to America to go to college?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I see. Well, I can understand that. I love Japan. I could live there. It's just, it's too expensive. But it's not more expensive than California anymore. But anyway, I love Japan. A little easier going here.
Yeah. When I was working in San Francisco, then I moved to LA. Every year I would go back to Japan, and I'd go and see Roshi at that time. Yeah, he was like my father too. Yeah.
Well, I want to hear about your work for the Soto Shu, because it's really interesting. That's when I first met you, is when you, except for the time in 1988, if you were translating for Harada Roshi.
I think it must have been, there were several people there translating. I think somebody else may have covered that one. That was just, coming back to the States, 2003. That's when I came back. 2003, 20 years ago. 20 years ago. That was just a kind of an honorable way to. I was living as a priest. I was living at the San Francisco Zen Center.
Right.
I was getting paid. I had a job. So it was a way to re-enter American culture fairly easily, I would say.
Yeah.
And I did translation work there, and I also kind of made my own job. I would visit Zen centers around the United States and Mexico. So that was part of the work I created for myself, just to go and see, and I would give a talk there and just see how how these people were doing around the United States. Not to mention San Francisco Zen Center, too. I got to see it from the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. How long did you live at Page Street?
7 years.
And weren't you living at Zenshuji in L.A. some?
Yes, I was there for 5 years. Yep.
And
I was so calm.
Were you there with Gengo Akiba Roshi or after?
No, I took his place. He resigned. Then I became the Sokan.
Yeah, the Sokan, is that the word?
Yeah.
I didn't.
For 5 years I was the Sokan. Then I resigned, and he became the Sokan again.
Oh, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that he recommended you to be the Sokan, to be the what we called the bishop of Soto Zen in America.
Yeah, that's the word they used at Zenshuji, but I never liked that word. Now we use the word the director. That's right. I think we talked about it. I talked to Akiba Roshi about that. And it came down to two people, and I thought I would be the better person. And I was ready to leave San Francisco, so I got the job.
And when I heard that you were the head of Soto Zen, did you? I didn't quite hear. In English, do you use the word in English, bishop, or do you just leave it with
director? We like the word director.
Oh, director. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's better. The director of Soto Zen in America. Well, I just thought, well, that is incredible. But you must have been the first Westerner.
I was.
Because there had always been such a split between the Japanese who had been the director and between the Japanese American Soto Zen, the Japanese Sotoshu, and the Zazen-oriented groups that Suzuki and Maizumi and some others had founded. And I thought that was very impressive. And with Gengo Akiba, you got somebody who'd been at Tassajara, and so it all seemed to be a little more harmonious to me.
Yeah. Well, it's two different worlds, that's for sure. The Japanese and Japanese-American world, they're just not interested in the Zazen.
Yeah. But, I really didn't like the attitude that was so prevalent, was that, we've got the real Zen and they're just like a church thing. It was like, didn't appreciate that they had a long tradition that they were involved in that we could learn from.
Yeah. Well, it was helpful that I had lived in Japan all those years.
Yeah.
And spoke Japanese. And that was okay. But it became difficult. So I stayed 5 years. I thought I really put in my time there. That was enough. So I was ready to leave LA too.
Yeah.
That's when I came to St. Louis.
Yeah. Well, now when you went to St. Louis, what did you do? Why did you go there, and what has happened?
Well, I met a woman from St. Louis.
Yeah.
And we decided to get married.
Yeah.
So was she going to move to L.A., or was I going to move to St. Louis? And I was ready to leave LA. So that was the answer. I'm going to move to St. Louis. And I inherited a small group of people who had formed a group called the Confluence Zen Center. So I became their teacher.
And so what's it called now?
Confluence. 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 Confluence.
The
Zen
Confluence Zen Center of St. Louis.
Yes. That's right. Confluence. I inherited that word, confluence, but the two biggest rivers in America, the Missouri and the Mississippi, come together here in St. Louis.
Oh, that's right.
The word confluence is a word you see around town in different ways.
Oh. So it has sort of a nice Zen. You can give it a sort of Zen or a spiritual interpretation too.
Yeah, coming together, like the Sangha, coming together as a Sangha.
Yeah.
To practice. Yeah.
I was in St. Louis in but I don't know 2008 or something at the request of some ecumenical Buddhist group there, and I gave a bunch of talks, like 4 or 5 talks, and I never do that, but they'd asked me, so I did it. I really enjoyed it, and there were all these different groups, and there was one of them was a Chinese Zen group, our Chinese Buddhist group.
We have a group called the Buddhist Council, and we have several Soto groups here in St. Louis.
Yeah,
4. We have 4.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
Maybe you were invited by the older one, Missouri Zen Center. I can't hear you at all.
Pardon?
I couldn't hear you.
No, I muted myself and coughed. I'm going to do it again. Pardon. If I mute it, there's a blank space, and then I know to cut that up. But if I cough, I don't notice it. I can't see it in the WAV file. Anyway, I really enjoyed St. Louis, and I remember the Indian mounds outside of town, and I enjoyed the people, and I was impressed with all the different groups.
Yeah.
So,
we have some. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, we have some big, fairly big temples here, right in the middle of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Chinese. Maybe you went out to MABA too. Do you remember MABA, Middle America Buddhist Association?
Oh yeah.
Outside of town, about an hour outside of town.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They have a big property out there, and they've just done a lot of building out there, and pretty impressive.
I remember going to St. Louis in 1964. I'd been in Mississippi at the civil rights thing for a while. And what was I doing? I guess I was hitchhiking to Ann Arbor. Oh, I'd been in, I guess I was going to Ann Arbor to do something with SDS. Anyway, I went I was hitchhiking from Fort Worth to Ann Arbor. It was one of my things there in 64. And in St. Louis, I would hitchhike. I would carry a coat and tie because I could get rides so much quicker that way. Just a sport coat and a tie. And there was a country club there that had a reciprocal relationship with a country club that my family was members of in Fort Worth. So I went and hung out there for a couple hours just to take a break because I couldn't get a ride. And then I went back out and I stood 12 hours. Finally got a ride. I don't know why it was so hard, but that's my oldest memory of St. Louis. But how have you found it?
Oh, I like it. I think it's fine. I mean, it's a very segregated town, and I feel sad about that. But there's not a lot I can do about that. So, where we live, where my wife and I live, it's a quiet neighborhood, and people are friendly, and lots of young families with kids walking up and down the street with their dogs and kids. And, it's fine, and our group is doing well.
That's good. That's good. Now, how do we find your group online?
That would be www.confluencezen.org.
Yeah, confluencezen.org.
Yep.
And does that have, can we get lectures of yours? Or?
You know, I haven't done that too much, David. A little bit, but I just prefer working with people in person.
Yeah.
And we have Zoom and all that, but primarily people come and practice with us, with our body. And I haven't gotten around to doing too much. And to me, it's just another excuse not to come in. You go, I'll just listen to it online.
Yeah.
And so it's just maybe one day I'll branch out into that. But there's already so much stuff online anyway. So.
Yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you is your years with the Soto Shu organization and your 5 years as director. How was that?
Yeah. I mean, so I had been living for a long time in Japan. You know, that was going on 30 years in Japan. A lot of that time I'd been in a monastery.
Yeah.
And so, what was I going to do in America? What was I going to do? I didn't really have a vocation. And so that first 7 years, I wasn't planning to stay there that long, but that allowed me to acclimatize myself again to to America, excuse me. It also gave me the freedom to be a priest, to continue living my vocation as a monk, as a priest.
Yeah.
And so that part of it all made sense. As I mentioned, I got to travel. I got to visit quite a few different Zen temples around the United States. Got to meet lots of teachers and so on. I had time to continue doing translation. Translation has always been one of my passions to do that.
Well, yeah.
So that all made sense. I had gotten involved with a woman there. Finally, that did not work out. But that first 7 years just seemed like, well, getting to know American Zen and America. And then this job opportunity in LA came up. That was difficult. So you mentioned these two different worlds. I was trying to bridge two different worlds there. And to some extent I was able to do that. I started doing classes there at Zenshuji to bring in new people to build up that Zen group there. Meanwhile, I was learning how to do things like funerals and memorial services, which I never did in Japan. The Westerners at Hosshinji we were never expected to do those things. And but that finally became difficult, simply because I was not Japanese. And as you mentioned, traditionally that bishop or director position was done by a Japanese person. And that was a learning experience and difficult. And finally, I just realized I don't want to do this. I gave it a good try, but I want to try something else, and that's what I'm able to do here in Center.
Yeah.
So
well,
it all fits together. It all fits together as part of my life.
Yeah. I think it's great you did it. I mean, I thought, to me, it's like you did the impossible.
It was difficult.
That's amazing. And then, I mentioned the gap between the Japanese Soto Zen world and the American Soto Zen world, and I've had. Well, there was you might have even been there. There was this event. In fact, you were there. You remember that thing? UC Berkeley, San Francisco Zen Center did I'm not sure. It was maybe the 50 years of Zen Center or
right,
something like that. And
a symposium.
One of the in the first day at Page Street, Mel Weitzman gave a talk where he emphasized that Shunryu Suzuki said there was moss on the branches of Zen in Japan, and it's like he was talking about it, and he came to America and he found beginner's mind and this and that. And it was, to me, it was like this total put down of Japanese Zen and saying, like, we've got the real thing. And that, it to me, was a total misunderstanding of it. He thought he thought there were strong points on, Suzuki thought there were strong points on each side that we could learn from each other, but he certainly didn't think that, that what we were doing was superior. And also it's traditional for the Zen teachers to say, everything's gone down here. We got to rejuvenate it. I just saw it in a totally different context. And, there were all these Japanese priests there, like Fuchida, who, were involved with Zazen groups and this and that. And anyway, do you remember that?
I do. And part of it was in Berkeley, wasn't it? Part of that symposium.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And I was the rabble rouser in a way. I at one of those, maybe you were there. I said, "Listen, the real Zen has not been completely transmitted to this country, to America.
Yeah.
It hasn't, from my point of view.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that creates waves, but that's how it felt. And I'm glad you make that point, because that's why I'm here still doing this translation work, because there's still something, some inspiration and some awakening in these words that we can learn from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember you saying that back then, and I knew you felt that way. And on the second day, I asked for you to speak.
Oh.
Because you're even though you actually look rather imposing, you're very polite. You're not aggressive.
I've been living in Japan too long, maybe.
Right.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah. Well, is there anything? Have you written anything?
I have written a little bit, but I have written a little bit. Yeah, I've written a little bit. I mean, that was one thing, when I was in L.A. at Zenshuji.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, they had a newsletter. I think it came out. I'm pretty sure I still get that. It comes out every month. And I have to write something. So I started writing short essays every month. I was there 5 years. I don't know if I made 60 of them or not, but I did quite a few of them.
Oh.
That's mainly what I've written. Yep.
Oh.
I just haven't gotten around to writing too much here. My passion is still translating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now I've got this huge book that we're working on.
Yeah. And you're working on volume 2.
We're working on volume 2. I'm just lately I've been going over. I've done those chapters for volume 2 already. My partner is the bottleneck, as she calls it, and I'm hoping we can get going on that soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you one other thing.
Sure.
My understanding is that Hosshinji is not a functioning temple anymore.
That's correct. It's a temple, but they are no longer recognized as a Senmon Sodo, which means a training monastery. They don't have enough people there.
Yeah. Is there a teacher there? Is there a Jushoku? Is there a Seikkei?
No, there's a Jushoku, but no Seikkei. I think that man, the Jushoku, is recognized as a Jun Seikkei, means a vice or a vice Seikkei, junior Seikkei, a junior Seikkei. But you're supposed to, those monasteries are supposed to have a minimum of 10 people in training.
Mm-hmm.
And right now there's only 3 people there.
Uh-huh. And what about Bukokuji?
Oh, yeah, same. They never were. They never had that recognition.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it was sort of renegade thing or something, or it wasn't associated with the Soto Shu the way Hosshinji was.
Well, it is a Soto temple. In fact, it's a branch temple of Hosshinji. So at the very least, Tangen Roshi would come once a year for the Keizan, the ceremony for the founder's ceremony. And I think there were about 10 or 2 smaller temples that were part of, there were branch temples of Hosshinji, so they would all gather, those Jushoku would all gather on that day, May 15th.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why Bukokuji was never recognized, but maybe Tangen Roshi never wanted to. I don't know.
Yeah.
He didn't want to.
Yeah. It seemed like an island unto itself. He didn't want people, getting mail, reading, talking. He really encouraged them to cut everything off.
Yeah.
But I don't know. People came and went.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Some people were there quite a while. Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah. Some people stayed years, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, do you have anything? This has been fascinating. I really liked hearing about it all. Do you have anything to say before we say goodbye?
Well, yes. I think the significance of, for example, this commentary on Denkoroku is that, at least in my mind, Inoue Roshi was an enlightened teacher. He was an awakened teacher. And Keizan Zenji himself, in the Denkoroku, is tracing this transmission. We see transmission of light or transmission of illumination, but it's also the transmission of enlightenment. And this is something that got lost in the Soto sect. And that's another big reason, I think, the Denkoroku has not been given as much notice as maybe the Shobogenzo. And Keizan Zenji cast all of that in a different light, if I could say. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm hoping that this book will be read and studied by many Western Zen students.
Mm.
And I've sent you a copy to San Rafael.
Yeah.
So I hope you
get it.
Have a chance to look at it sometime.
I'll get it in, every few months I get the mail. I mean, we don't let it be, we don't let it go through the mail here. It's not like living in Japan. Living in Japan is just like living in America mail-wise. I'd get mail that had been sent 3 days before.
Right.
And here, I just tell people don't do it.
How long have you been in Bali?
10 years.
Wow. How old are you now?
78.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm 73.
Huh?
I'm 73.
Yeah. I figured that because I guess there was something indicated you were born in 1950. Yeah. And I haven't been back.
Right.
But I sort of miss it, but it's so big and you have to be in cars and go long distances and have a lot of money. Right. And so I just can't, I can't really imagine being back in America.
Which part of Bali are you?
I'm in Sanur, which is like, it's part of Denpasar, the big city. but it's the beach. It's and it's sort of quieter than it's in the south, which is busier and has more tourists and expats, but we're sort of the quieter end of it. Yeah, it's, Bali was considered overpopulated. I was reading a book about the Sukarno and the downfall of Sukarno and the mass murdering of communists and Chinese back in the mid-'60s. And Bali killed the highest percentage of people. It went totally nuts. But it was considered, one thing I noticed it was considered overpopulated in the mid-'60s. And I guess it is, but there's plenty of places that there aren't that many people. But I like infrastructure, and I like tech support and, and we can walk everywhere practically here.
Right.
So it's sort of nice.
Well, if you're in good health, it's good. I mean, you have access to good health care?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can walk to a hospital 20 minutes away that has everything. Okay. And it's very, very efficient and high quality. In fact, I would have not thought it possible when I came here because I'd been here before.
Yeah.
No, it's good, and we have national health care, and it's really good.
Good.
And I had laser surgery on a dislocated retina at another place before this new hospital was built. It was 9 years ago. And the total charge for everything, the medicine, the 3 visits, and the operation was $300.
Wow. Nice.
And I could get it for free now. But it's been good. And nice people. But
well, thank you for inviting me on your podcast. That's an honor, David.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. Peter Schneider and Peter and Jane Schneider talk about you, and they really they liked it when you were in L.A. and they have very high regard for you.
I just talked to Peter on the phone a couple of days ago. I sent him a copy of the book, and he's getting up there too. He's going to be 86 soon.
Wow, yeah, I got to call him. I've really enjoyed relating to them. They're just I haven't been in touch with them in a while. I mean, I gotta get back in touch there. Okay, well, Daigaku, it's really been great talking with you. If I get to St. Louis, I'll look you up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'll take you out to dinner.
Oh boy! Well, thank you. Okay. Well,
how about some ribs? Ribs.
Oh, what'd you say then?
How about some St. Louis ribs?
Oh goodness! I don't eat much food like that, but I could. I think I could make an exception.
I don't eat them often, but I like them now and then.
Yeah. Okay. Well, take care and thanks a lot, and may your Dharma thrive.
Okay. Same to you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
So Thanks a lot, Daigaku. That was great. Really enjoyed it. Very impressive. Very, very impressive indeed. Thank you very much. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, guest Doggett Boombita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.